There was a time back on this old website that doesn't exist anymore called Stickam. And I don't remember the name of the room. I don't remember the guy. All I remember is that there was a Muslim in the room. And he was a real Muslim, not a Mino, not a Muslim in name only who says they're Muslim but then mouths off platitudes. This was a true believer, wanted non-believers to be punished in various ways, and multiple wives, and yeah, he was a Mohammedan, a real Mohammedan. And this guy was in the stickam room, and so the first thing I did was I muted the Mohammedan, and I asked this guy, I said, "Why is this person here? Are you going to become a Muslim? Are you open to Islam?" "No." "Is this person open to what you have to say?" And I kept asking, "Why is he here? What is he here for? Are you open to Islam? Is he open to you?" If the answer is of course no to both of those questions, so there's no point for him to be here at all. And that's something that came to mind when I saw this post by Alex Knepper. Alex Knepper says, "I unfriended Ryan Falk. I like to entertain even the most eccentric and unusual beliefs, good or bad. But he's just too much of blah." Okay. And right here at the beginning he says, "I like to entertain." What you entertain? What's... And this is what is so strange about this. And I'll just continue reading it here. "All he does is rant about race, and he frequently hijacks and force blah, 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 blah." And then continuing on at the bottom here says, "I have to draw a line somewhere, and downplaying the horrors of Nazism and the African slave trade is, putting it mildly, a step too far." And I look at this and I think, downplaying X and Y? Downplaying? Either X happened or it did not. Okay. And entertain ideas? Why do you entertain... I don't entertain ideas. I listen to something and it's correct or incorrect. And the hell of it is, I have a suspicion. I don't know for sure, but I have a suspicion that I am more persuadable than someone like this Alex Knepper. I am more likely to be persuaded by something I don't already believe than someone like Alex Knepper. However, if Alex Knepper made a stickam room, he would let in Muslims, let the Muslims speak, but I would not. Now, we would both let in, say, an advocate of social credit, economic theories, come in and speak. We would both allow them to speak. However, I would be more likely to be persuaded. Maybe. Hard to say. Well, let's take something more radical. Let's take a Proudhonian anarchist. I would be more likely to be persuaded by a Proudhonian anarchist than Alex Knepper. However, both me and Alex Knepper, in terms of possibly being persuaded by a Muslim, are close to zero. Virtually, both of us have virtually zero chance of being persuaded of Islam by a Muslim. Okay. However, Alex Knepper would let the Muslim come in and let the Muslim speak. I would not. Okay. And I think what this gets to is substantive free speech versus this free speech in a very nominal, trivial sense. Right? The point of free speech is you listen to arguments and then change views, right? Because you have somebody who believes something differently. Okay, well, if you believe different things, someone's wrong, or both of you are wrong. At least one of you is wrong. Maybe both of you are wrong. Okay, so the way I see it is you need to get cracking and figure out who's wrong, and there you go. You need to figure out who's wrong and fix it. You need to fix it. But I don't think Alex Knepper has that point of view. Right? If there's a Muslim coming in, I'm thinking, okay, that's wrong. Let's fix it. But Proudhon, but and yet, like with a Proudhonian coming in, I'm probably more likely to be persuaded. I mean, I'm probably not going to be persuaded, but I'm more likely to be persuaded than, say, Knepper. Okay, in my opinion, I am more open-minded than Knepper. Okay, I was, and this may seem like a a self-falating statement, but I believe there's evidence of this. I mean, for example, my having in fact been persuaded by some, classical anarchist perspectives on property. Okay, having been persuaded, into Austrianism, out of Austrian, a general kind of what is the deductive approach, but at the same time seeing some benefits to this hyper deductive approach sometimes. Okay, having been persuaded here and there on social credit, right? I mean, I think there's evidence that I am in fact more persuadable than most people, and because that's the point of free speech in my view. Right, the point of free speech is the change in the view. Like, let's say you have a regime that legally prohibits the expression of certain points of views. Okay, that's that's a bad thing. But then let's say you have another society that it's perfectly legal to express all these points of views that are prohibited in the other regime, but not a single person listens. Well, I mean, if practically speaking, it's an identical effect. Practically speaking, it's identical. I mean, legal prohibition of the speech, and just everyone just being completely shut off from it. Whether or not you think they should or shouldn't. Like, for example, I'm basically completely shut off from the expression of Islam. Right, so if the belief is Islam, I am basically shut off from any Islamic propagandizing, and when I use the term propagandizing, I don't mean that pejoratively. I don't mean propaganda. Propaganda didn't used to originally wasn't a pejorative term, and I don't use it as a pejorative term. But I'm completely shut off to or proselytizing. We'll say proselytizing. I'm completely shut off to Islamic proselytizing. I'm completely closed-minded in terms of Islam. Okay. And if in the United States it was strictly illegal to proselytize Islam, that would have zero effect on me becoming a Muslim, because in either case there's virtually zero chance. Maybe there's a very, 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 very tiny chance that but it's virtually zero chance, right? And so in that sense, a formal legal prohibition on the spread of Islam, and just me not being open to it at all, it's an identical effect from the Muslim's point of view regarding me. Now, there are other people who are persuadable on Islam. I'm not one of them. Okay. However, I still believe in a more general sense that I am more persuadable on things in general. So when people I hear people say, they value free speech, well, so what? You know, like if and I just think about that stickam room. I just think about that guy letting in the Muslim. It's like, well, what does free speech really mean to you? Right? Does it mean letting them say things, or does it mean actually engaging them? Right? Actually engaging those arguments, in full weight, in the full nuance as well. Not trying to get it, like, not trying to learn just enough of a facsimile of their arguments so you can then argue against them. You know, extend arguments past what they were making into like absurd areas and saying, well, if you think this, then you must think this, and that's stupid. And doing these simplistic deconstructions based on not having all the nuance. And you can do that. You can play all these little games, and then say, well, I'm not closed-minded. I let him speak, and I'm continuing to allow him to post on our forums. But if you're not fully trying to integrate their arguments in their full nuance, then you might as well not let them be posting on your forums. All right. So that's really the point of this video, from here I'm going to go into more petty stuff regarding Alex Knepper's comment here. Alex continues, all he does is rant about race, and he too frequently hijacks thread to force his pet issues into the conversation under the loosest pretexts. Now this is something. Two things on this. The first thing is that Alex Knepper will often make relational claims, like one example that he brought up about a relational claim that he would be to relate Hitler to ISIS, right? Hitler as an example of evil, and relate that to ISIS. Oh, Hitler, and by that Knepper means the whole Hitler regime. That's a big box, and whenever you invoke Nazism in anything, you're smuggling in a lot of assumptions about the Nazi regime. Okay. Now, you don't need to use a whole lot of text in order to smuggle in all these assumptions about the Nazi regime. You just say, like Hitler, ISIS did blah, 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 blah. Like the Nazis, ISIS are genocidal maniacs and hate the Jews. Well, there's like all sorts of assumptions there. The first assumption is, well, what do you mean the Jews? What did these people said to be Jews do that harmed Germany? What did these people said to be Jews do that harmed Muslims? Right? In my opinion, Jews have done more to harm Germany than to harm Muslims in the Middle East, and that most of the problems faced by people in the Middle East are self-inflicted. Right? The reason Palestine is poor is because of the decisions of the Palestinians, not because of Israel. Okay, and that the Palestinians who lost their land because they fled that area during the war and were just not allowed a right to return. Which and I look at the Middle East and the level, and it's like, yeah, sure, they're getting. They face a lot, get wrecked a lot by the West, but you know what? The UAE doesn't, Kuwait doesn't, and I think like if I could have the level of it, like if I could have a country, like they have countries, they have fucking countries. Okay, white nationalists don't have a country. They have countries. We don't, and I'm supposed to feel sorry for them, right? They have, maybe you could say, oh, but the policies in those countries are influenced by the West. Okay, well, they certainly have a lot more autonomy than I do. Okay, I have zero. I have none. I have zip. Uh, direct political control over an area. I have none. I have zero. What I would give to be in their situation right now. Okay, I'm going off on tangents here, and back to this thing by Alex Knepper. And you frequently hijacks threads to force his pet issues. So what I'm looking at, what I think what Knepper will do is he'll say something about, say, Hitler, and I'll say, but that's a relation, and I'll I'll say no, that's not quite it, right? And I'll argue against that. Moreover, he says hijacks threads. Well, here's the thing, like. Alex Knepper will say something about slavery. He'll say, well, whites don't understand, the experience of and blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, well, slaves in the U.S. didn't have it that bad. And, slaves were taller than, white people at the time. And Knepper said, well, that's because of select. And it was weird. Alex Knepper said this very confidently. Well, that's because of selection for slavery. Which is something that a lot of people say, and they say it very confidently. And yet today, whites are actually taller than blacks. So that's just matter-of-factly not. I mean, the height differences today, I'm going to just assume, are almost entirely down to genetics. That nutritional variables are not a significant variable anymore between populations. This is not to say that some new super nutrient can't make everyone taller, but that the disparities in height are almost entirely genetic nowadays between groups, and so, but he said that, and I went in and argued, said, well, why do you think that slavery, that the Atlantic slave trade selected for the hardiest blacks? First, more so than whites, because first off, blacks worked less than white people did. Okay, whites today are taller than black people today. So, but blacks were taller back then, right? So, given nutritional parity, or at least nutritional parity in regards to developing to full height, full potential height, in that environment that exists today, whites are a little bit taller. But in the past, when nutrition was more of a variable, blacks were taller, right? Which is a sign that they were getting better nutrition, right? It's evidence that they were getting better nutrition, okay? And they were working less. They worked fewer hours per year. So I point that out, and then Knepper says that I'm going off on tangents, and then Knepper says, well, they could work fewer hours, but I think I'd rather work more hours and be free, right? And that's a choice. That's a choice that people make today. And my response to that was, I went into a response saying, well, first off, chattel slavery is outlawed, so we don't know. And second of all, people sign up for companies all the time, right? And they're not independent contractors. They prefer the security of secure work, working for a company. But while they're at that work, they're subservient to higher ups. So they're exchanging freedom for security, right? That's what all jobs are. And government is another example of trading freedom for security. So to a degree, yeah, people trade freedom for security. And second of all, the Federal Writers Project under Roosevelt, they actually interviewed a bunch of slaves and asked them about slavery. And I haven't looked through those results yet, but they weren't overwhelmingly hostile to it in the way Knepper is. right? And so, I mean, I think one thing to figure out whether or not they thought slavery was really bad is to ask them about it. You know, what did they think? I know runaway slaves exist, but so did runaway. So, I mean, so and so I said all this stuff, and then Knepper accused me of hijacking the thread to talk. But that's the hell of it, right? Knepper will just sort of say these things, and I say no, and I'll go into and it takes me more time to respond to Knepper's statements than Knepper's statements, because Knepper will say something like, "Well, you know, slavery selected for the biggest, hardiest blacks." Okay, and I have to say, well, what is the transatlantic slave trade select for? Does it select for height? I mean, disease resistance is an obvious thing that pops to mind. I mean, to the extent that there's really that many more. I mean, Africa's kind of connected to the world islands, so however, I mean, there's probably some more diseases, but I guess disease resistance would be something that would be selected for. Does that correlate with height? Maybe a little bit, but how much? Does in terms of being able to deal with the labor on a slave plantation, does height and moreover, if height correlates with that, well, fine. But remember, whites were working even harder. So, so if there's selection pressure, if being taller makes one more able to engage in the labor, agricultural labor, well, whites should have been selected for height even more than blacks. Okay, and so that would not explain the disparity at all. So I respond in all these ways, and then Knepper looks, and basically Knepper says something. I respond to him, and he blames me for the mess. Okay, I keep responding to all these little things he says, and then he accuses me of being non-topical, right? Because when I'm now that I'm talking about, you know, selection pressures for height, and saying that no, blacks are actually shorter today than whites, you know, that's very far afield from what his original post was, which was some stupid Knepper story. Knepper likes his stories. He likes big narratives. He doesn't like to deal in specific. He doesn't like facts very much. He likes big, fuzzy stories. He's like a politician. He thinks a lot like a politician, and he's really interested in party politics, Democrat, Republican, party politics stuff, right? So and he's blaming me for hijacking his thread when really I just engage in thorough responses to everything he says to me. And as a result, yes, it goes very far off topic from his original post. That's how conversations go. That's not only how conversations go, but when I engage in kind of a free-flowing thought, that's how it goes. For example, when I was, talking about how good the Arabs in the Middle East have it in terms of political autonomy, a political autonomy, I can only dream of. That was me going off topic, going off on tangents, and that's what happens. That's what happens in forums all the time. That's what happens in comment threads all the time. That's what happens in stream of conversation talks where you talk to yourself. It happens all the time. Okay. And so I'm in his sections. I'll just repeat it. He'll say something, I'll respond to it, and it creates a mess, right? Because they're bringing up all these things, and I'm responding to all these things, and it's a big mess, and he blames me for the mess. Well, when I'm just responding thoroughly to all the stuff he says. Continues, I don't believe in simply shutting down people with unpalatable beliefs. I think we should do our best to constantly work in the spirit of mutual self-improvement. I don't believe in using other tools as a signal our virtue. Look at me refusing to tolerate racist bigots. Yeah, but that's exactly what you're doing, right? I mean, you say, I don't believe in doing this, but it's what you're doing. Okay, so... And I don't think anyone has proved myself least of all by simply winning a debate. Well, that's good, because you don't. Well, you don't win any debates because you don't engage in any debates in any meaningful sense, right? I don't think Knepper and I have ever debated, ever, right? I don't. I mean, Knepper just kind of he just sort of says things, and it's strange. He's really. It's weird that he seems to be very. He doesn't like to get into numbers and the statistics of policy effects and stuff like that. He doesn't. I mean, he'll repeat general statistics that come from like newspapers, but he doesn't really seem to. He doesn't really like to explore the effects of policy. He's very vague. It's so vague, and so. I don't think anyone is approved by simply winning a debate. Well, that's good because you don't. The first step to winning a debate is engaging in a debate, which you don't do, Knepper. You just don't. You don't. You're too vague to be debating. And he says that doesn't mean that things will never get heated, obviously, but there should be a baseline blah 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 of at least some substance. Okay? And I had to draw the line somewhere. I mean, this is just, this is just like, your face is made of poop, right? That's what he's saying here, right? There should be a baseline of at least some substance, which Ryan Falk has none. Ryan Falk has no substance, as opposed to me, who is full of substance. Continues, I have to draw the line somewhere. And downplaying the horrors of Nazism, like this right here, this combined with the stuff I like to entertain, just shows how social he is. Like, I like to entertain. Downplaying. Like, there's no. Downplaying is like what you do when you talk about, some embarrassing thing that your daughter did. Okay, that's what downplaying does. When I say that there were no homicidal gas chambers, I'm not downplaying. I'm saying there were no homicidal gas chambers. Now, you can disagree and say that I'm, completely at sea on that, and there's all sorts of evidence. But look at the convergence of witness testimony, right? Look at the thousands of witnesses who attest to the homicidal gas chambers at Dachau and Bergen-Belsen and Mauthausen. Right? Look at the Catholic priests who attest to people being burned alive in homicidal ovens in the camps in France. Right? We have all these eyewitnesses. Right? So I mean, you could say that I'm wrong about this. Okay, and fine. And if you want to say I'm incorrect, that's okay. Game on. But this word choice, downplaying. And like downplaying the horrors of the African slave trade. I mean, my argument is that blacks in the U.S., in a global sense, had it pretty good. And in terms of not being able to understand the African experience, well, fine. Do blacks understand the experience of a white person in Russia who had a much harder road to hoe while they were in Russia, and had a harder road to hoe during the first few the first generation while they were in the United States. Right? And then maybe had it easier, second generation on because of the hard work, because of the behavior of their parents. Okay? Do Africans that's what he was talking about. He was talking about and in his original post, he was talking about how, white people in the U.S., and the way they don't understand the African experience in the United States, they also don't understand the difficulty faced by homosexuals. Now, first off, like homosexuals, economically speaking, make more money per capita than straight people. Okay, so they're obviously homosexuals, at least systematically, are not being economically oppressed. Or if they are, then clearly the inherent money earning potential of homosexuals more than overrides the economic suppression that they face. Maybe. And I don't know of any evidence, any systematic evidence that homosexuals face. I mean, face what? Face what? What? I mean, you could say, well, homosexuals are more likely to commit suicide. Okay, well, imagining that you're oppressed is not the same thing as being does not mean you're. I mean, blacks imagine they're oppressed, and they're not oppressed at all. Like, so I mean, so the fact that homosexuals are more likely to commit suicide, so obvious that their brains are different. There's something going on with their brain that's different from straight people. Obviously, enough to make them homosexual, which is not neurotypical. So obviously they're not neurotypical. So when you see differences in all sorts of other behaviors, well, don't be so quick to assign that to the effects of environment, right? When those, I mean, maybe they are, but that's something that takes evidence. But Alex Knepper just seems to assume it on with no evidence other than his own claimed personal experience. Now, in my opinion, and this happens with blacks as well, is that they face some bullshit. Like, there's some bullshit thrust upon them. People treat them in bullshit ways. I don't need to give examples. We all know what it means to be treated badly. You're treated with bullshit. And what Knepper does is he imagines, oh, it's because I'm a homosexual. Well, no, it's probably because you're just an asshole. Like, for example, me making this video to you, Alex Knepper. I'm a homosexual. Do you think I have some like anti-gay animus? Is that why I'm making this video? Is that why I'm so is that why I dislike you so much? Because you're a homosexual? Are you being put upon because you're a homosexual? No. See, and so based on this experience, based on my personal experience with you, Knepper, and based on my understanding of the data regarding homosexuals, okay, what I think is happening is that people treat you badly because you treat them badly because you're kind of a shithead. And then you imagine that it's because you're gay. Okay? Let me put it another way. Coughlin666, in a video response to me, made all sorts of gay jokes, and I think he even made like a reference to AIDS or something. So what does that mean? Does that mean Coughlin666 is anti-homosexual? Of course not. Of course not. Yeah, of course he's not anti-homosexual, okay? What he is anti-me. And he says all these anti-homosexual things to me, right, thinking that it's going to make me feel bad, thinking that it's going to cause psychic pain upon me, okay? But the reason he said all these things, the reason he made all these homophobic slurs was not because he's anti-gay, it's because he's anti-me, right? I don't go around imagining that, oh, I'm put upon because I'm a homosexual. No, I'm put upon because of the things that I say, right? I say a lot of things that make a lot of people unhappy, okay? Or let's do it the other way. Did you unfriend me on Facebook because I'm a homosexual? No, it's because of the stuff that I said, right? And so I imagine that that's your experience. That you're facing that a lot of people are treating you fairly, and you imagine that you're being treated unfairly because you're gay. And this is something that blacks do as well. Like, they get treated fairly, right? And sometimes fairly means treated like shit, and they imagine that they're being treated like shit because they're black. No, it's because you are shit. That's why you're being treated like shit, because you are shit. Right? It's not because you're gay. It's not because you're black. It's because of your behavior. You're behaving like a shitty person. But But that aside, downplaying the horrors of, yeah, it's like you have this little club, and in this little club you tell stories, and stories that or statements that radically disrupt your stories get shut out of the club. Okay. And it's a social thing, you know. And I go back to that stickam room where the guy who let in somebody who was a Muslim, Alex Knepper, you know, he has continually posting on his pages this guy Omar Yakubi, whatever, who's not a Muslim. Even if he says he's, I don't know if he claims to be a Muslim or not, but he's not a Muslim, right? He's not a Muslim because of his, because basically he has quote unquote progressive views, i.e., university social science consensus views on everything, right? So obviously not a Muslim. Okay, even if he thinks he is and says he is, he's not a Muslim. Okay, and this guy is posting on Knepper's pages all the time, and Knepper disagrees with him, shows no sign of being persuaded by him, shows no sign of persuading him. So why is he posting there? And why is Knepper letting him post? What's the purpose? You could say, well, free speech. Well, the point of free speech is the exchange of ideas. Obviously, ideas aren't being exchanged, so why is he there? Okay? And this is, why is he there? Because social. Because what Omar is saying is a socially acceptable thing to say, even though it doesn't convince Knepper, right? And so Alex Knepper will entertain it. It's social. It's a big social club. It's a big social thing. Okay? And that's what this is all ultimately boils down to. He's not serious, right? The reason, I bring up, well, you say X, Y, Z about the Holocaust. That's a pretty big fundamental belief. A really big fundamental belief. And given that it's a really big, it's a fundamental belief in the civic religion called, which I call the Americult. Right? But I don't think it, and I say Americult is kind of a pejorative thing. And if you don't like that, fine, But at least you should recognize that in the bagatelle of beliefs that make up the story of America, the Holocaust is a big one of those beliefs. Okay? Given that it's a very big one of those beliefs, doesn't it behoove you to give it some scrutiny? Right? That's pretty intuitive to me. The bigger the belief, the more scrutiny you should give it. But it seems just the opposite is happening. Now, why would just the opposite happening? Well, the opposite happening makes perfect sense if this is just all a big social club, right? Denying the Holocaust is something you just don't do because it is socially unacceptable, right? And that seems to be it, right? You look at the language he uses. That seems to be it, right? Or saying that blacks in the U.S. didn't have it that bad, at least compared to how most people in the world had it, at any time that they were in the U.S. up to today. Blacks have never had it that bad. Blacks have never been oppressed. Their oppression, their quote-unquote oppression, consists of whites trying to be free from them. No blacks in our pools. Blacks go make you... And even in the horrors of the Jim Crow South, there was still a net wealth transfer from whites to blacks. Even in the horrible Jim Crow South, white people were more likely to be killed by blacks than the reverse. Right? Yeah, black people were more likely to murder a white person than a white person was to murder a black person from the years 1865 to 1965. That's obviously true today, but it was true then as well. Okay? And black schools in Alabama, yes, there's more money spent per pupil on whites than on blacks, but there was still a net wealth transfer. Still, something like 95% of all tax revenues came from whites, and about a third of all, I believe it was, and about a third of all public school spending went to blacks, even though blacks were about half the population at the time. This was like, right after the Civil War. So there was still a massive wealth transfer, and there were still massive wealth transfers all the way up to 1965. Okay, this is oppression. This is oppression. Let me ask you this: when white people first entered North America, and it was just a big fucking wilderness, how much wealth transfer did they get from who? There's nobody else. I mean, there's the Native Americans, but they don't have anything. There's none. There was no oppression. They were getting stuff. They were getting free stuff. They were getting free schools, stuff that the Europeans who first arrived in the Americas didn't have. And you could say, oh, but the blacks were being shut out from... Well, they weren't being shut out from black schools. They weren't being denied access to black teachers. Right? Basically, they had everything that whites in the 1600s had, plus whatever extra wealth transfers they got. Right? They had it... Basically, let me put it this way. Blacks in the year 1865 had it immeasurably better than whites in what was going to become the United States in the year 1600 had. Okay, I mean that's and that's kind of a perspective that most people don't see. And this, again, I'm going off on kind of a tangent, and that's what happens. That's what happens when you talk to yourself. That's what happens when you talk with groups. Another thing you do is you loop, or at least I loop a lot when speaking in an unscripted manner. So perhaps I should summarize this. If this was scripted, at the end I would have a summation of what I was going to say, but I don't think it could create a succinct summary extemporaneously right here, so I'm not even going to try. So I'll just end the video.